Hi, everybody. I'm super psyched to meet with you tonight. When you get here, definitely let me know you're here. I would also love to know what kind of classroom you'll be teaching next year, what age students and things like that. Today, I'm going to focus on teaching intervention plans and why we would spend time doing them. Because I know that sometimes they seem a little bit like um, an extra step, an extra piece of paperwork, and I don't want it to be that way. So as you come in, please introduce yourself. We've got about 4 minutes before we get started. I like to get started just a little bit early so that we can let everybody know that we are here. So let me know if you're here. I have a new worker in the Autism Classroom Resources team. Excuse my mess. She's just joined us. Her name is Lucy. Hey, Lucy. Hey, Lucy. She's not helping a whole lot, but she's very good moral support. So I think I'll keep her around. Lucy's right there. She should be barking at all of you. She should. She really should. I'm amazed actually that she's not chasing lizards. That seems to be her favorite pastime. Got a few more minutes before we get started, but as you're coming in, let me know what kind of classroom you're going to teach next year, what age, things like that. If you are watching the recording, you can fast forward to where the countdown hits 0, and that's where we're actually going to start with content. So who all is here? Give me a shout out and let me know who's here. Hi, Laura. How was your Saturday? I think it's backwards. Hi, Danielle. I'm so glad to have you here. Hi, Jill. You'll have K1 self-contained inclusion and resource. Awesome. So you'll have everything K to 1. That'll be a fun class. Hi, Holly. It's good to see you virtually. Apparently we're boring Lucy. She's sighing. Okay, Cindy, for everybody who doesn't know, I can kind of figure that out, but exactly what does PPCD mean? Yay, Texas. Where in Texas, Cindy? I know from experience it's a pretty big state. Got about another minute before we get started. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself to Lucy again. Lucy! Hi, honey. Say hi. Hey, Ruthann. It's good to see you. Every time I put that back, I mess up my organization. Holly's teaching K2 autistic support, again, for her 8th year. And she says hi, Lucy. So much to learn. Preschool program for children with disabilities. That's what PPCD means. So you're near Houston. So you're actually near a part of Texas I will not be at this summer. Nicole says she had more interviews this past week. And so you'll see where you'll be teaching. It'll be an adventure. Okay. So it is 4:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to get rid of my countdown. Tonight I wanted to talk about the teaching intervention plan, and I actually created the teaching intervention plan as a way of helping the teachers that I was working with at the time really conceptualize how they were teaching skills, where they were teaching skills, and how data was going to be collected. So I designed it specifically so that you really had to think through from the IEP how the IEP is going to be implemented. And that's really my focus on it, is it gives you a document, and there are a lot of reasons to do it. It does tend to be kind of what good teachers did in their heads all along. It's not, rocket science, but it is a good way to have it on paper, which also helps us with communication. So I want to show you briefly what it is and what goes into it. And I will put a link back at the video when we're finished of where you can download I have a couple old ones that I've used that are available for free on my blog. The new one with the introductory information, the structure of the old ones is the same. The new one has some introductory information at the front of it, and it's actually part of my manual from TPT. And I'll put both those links above the video when I'm done. So definitely come back for those. I'm going to switch us over. Actually, first I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to switch us over. And Danielle's going to be teaching K2 815. Awesome. Okay, so what you see is essentially a teaching intervention plan, and I'll show you one that you can read more clearly. I use this as my first step in organizing classrooms. And the idea behind it is that you're taking the goals and objectives, you are bringing them and talking about where are you going to teach the skill. So where do you get the most opportunities to teach the skill? What type of instructional method are you using? How are you going to collect data? And then any materials that you need. I do one of these for each student. I'll also clarify, because I know there's been some confusion, I don't use them as lesson plans. I know that some places do, and you certainly could use the format for lesson plans. The way that I use the TIP is to set it up so that for each IEP, I have a teaching intervention plan. The idea being, for IEPs, I want to make sure that each goal and objective fits into the structure of the classroom. I know how I'm going to teach it, and I know how I'm going to evaluate it. So that's really where it comes from. So I only do one a year. So I do it when I get an IEP. Now, if an IEP changes, I amend it, or I do it over if it's a completely new IEP. But I don't do more than one of these a year in most situations. I know that they are an extra piece of paper. I know that they're an extra step. But there are some reasons to use them, which I will cover in just a minute. But I thought it would be helpful for you to be able to see exactly what they are. So on the new one, those of you who have been with me for a long time, I used to talk about the Comprehensive Autism Planning System, the CAPS. And this is what I used originally before the CAPS existed. So I created this more for self-contained teachers. I tend to use the CAPS when I'm working with students who are fully included, where I have the teacher's schedule and I have to implement the student's IEP in that schedule, as opposed to a self-contained classroom where I create the schedule to meet the needs of the students that are in the classroom. So each year it's going to look different. So the teaching implementation plan, or sometimes I call it the teaching intervention plan, is basically how do we implement our strategies. And so I like to have just some basic information up front, because I put these in the front of my students' data notebooks or program books. And it gives me a place that I can just identify some basic information, like what kind of sensory strategies does the student need? Are there safety concerns? What are his reinforcers? When was this done? So we know how old it is. What's his communication strategy? so that I've got a snapshot of the student right up front. And so there's actually 2 pages of that. It asks for current reading curriculum. It's also a strategy that I use to make sure it goes to the next environment at the end of the year so that they know where we left off with the curriculum. I actually have a transition form that I use for that as well that has this information that also gets updated. If you are in the Special Educator Academy, that form is available as part of a quick win on how to use the transition form to make sure that next year's teacher picks up on the curriculum where you left it off. So we're not doing level 1 Edmark one year and then she starts with level 2. This is just to give a snapshot. And I find it's really useful because it's also something I can give to the paraprofessionals for them to be able to see very quickly what the student needs, and it gives me a place to write in what I need to think about in terms of training the staff. So this is kind of what it looks like. And so what you see are the IEP goals and objectives. Obviously, if the goal encompasses the objectives, then it doesn't need its own line. If the goal was a different skill than the objectives, then I would include it and map it out as well. The primary teaching activity is where we're going to teach the skill. It's the place that we're going to get the most opportunities, and it's the place where we're going to take our data. Hi, Anne. Good to see you. Our incidental opportunities are things that we practice. Where can we practice this skill? But maybe it's not so many opportunities. And then from this, what instructional method are we going to use? In this case, we have communication goals. So we're using the picture exchange communication system. So we're using that for him to teach this actual skill. I have a PECS data sheet that we used in the program where this was written. So we're going to use that as our data collection. And then I need to know that I've got the reinforcer assessment completed and I've got the preferred items that he's going to make these requests for. So those are just my notes. When I get all of these done at the beginning of the year, I then can go through, pull my data sheets, add to any group data sheets that I need, pull any materials that I need. I make notes if I need to write a new teaching program or something like that. So that's kind of how it's done. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, but not a whole lot. So he'll read environmental print. He'll follow a visual schedule. We're going to practice that during his independent work time. We're going to get lots of practice in that in other activities. We're going to teach it up in independent work and the structured teaching time. We've got an independent work data sheet and we have notes about what we need to do. So here's why I use the tip. The first one is because it reviews the IEP. Reading through an IEP, I don't know how many of you read through multiple IEPs a day, but when you do, your eyes glaze over after a while and they all start to sound alike. I also find it really hard to find the information quickly in an IEP that I need. This puts it in a format that I can find it and put my hands on it much faster. The other thing is that once I write through, like I've done this a couple ways because I come in to provide support to classrooms. So my job is often I take other consultants. So I've done it where I've had the other consultants come in and had them do the tip. And I found that when I walked into the classroom, I really struggled because I hadn't done it. There's something about writing and working through this process that makes you extremely aware of your students' needs and their IEP goals. So that's a big thing that I think is important. It also really makes you think through your instruction. And I designed it because I was sitting with people who didn't necessarily have a strong teaching background, but they were being asked to instruct and be accountable for that. And so when we would go over the students' goals, they would say, well, he's not really doing very well with this. And I would say, well, how are you teaching it? And they would say, in the play area. And I was like, okay, that's where are you teaching it? I'm asking what strategy you're using. So really thinking through, I've got this goal I need to teach. Am I going to use a curriculum? So what might go into that might be, I'm going to use the Edmark to teach the sight words. Do I have a specific teaching strategy like discrete trials or the picture exchange system or things like that? And then the next piece is it makes sure that every goal and objective is connected to a data collection system. So it makes sure that I know how I'm going to teach the skill, and it makes sure that I know how I'm going to take data on the skill. It also helps to organize your schedule, because once you've done the tip for each of the students in your class, then you kind of know I need a ton of explicit instruction in very small groups. Or my kids have a lot of social needs, so I need larger groups where they have to work on taking turns and sharing and things like that. Or I have a lot of kids who have goals out on the job site or doing jobs within the school. I got to make sure I create those. So once you do it, you kind of get a good feel for what your classroom schedule is going to need to include. So you're not just kind of shooting in the dark. It also is a really good tool for communicating with the staff, because let's face it, we want our staff to be implementing instruction throughout the day. My goal in a classroom is that the students are engaged in instruction, not necessarily academics, because not all instruction is academic, but they are engaged in instruction throughout their whole day. They don't have a lot of time to waste. And because of that, I have to make sure that the staff knows what they're supposed to be teaching to that student in that activity. So if I have a student who's doing a science project, is the goal for him to interact with a partner to do the lab? Is the goal for him to learn how to do the science concepts in the science lab? Is it to follow directions? What exactly are we doing this for? And I think that's a real key, so it communicates with staff. And then, as Holly just said, it allows us to communicate with families. Imagine that you're a family member who doesn't really know how this classroom comes together. They don't really get how it all works. So they're given an IEP for goals and objectives and told this is what we're going to teach, but they don't really know how it's going to get implemented. So this is something that I've also used to communicate with families to help them understand where and how the teaching is being delivered. I've also, and I didn't list this, but I've also found it to be very useful when there is a dispute between the family and the school, or if there's a due process, because being able to say, this is how the IEP is implemented goes far beyond just looking at the progress that students might be making or presenting data. So when your parents say, well, why does he have to keep doing that independent work? He's just doing busy work. What are your goals for independent work for that student? Is it to work independently? Is it to increase the amount of time he can work? What goal from his IEP have you attached to that time of day? So it just gives you some good organization and communication in that way. Welcome, Brittany. We're glad to see you. It gives you a way to communicate with the family about how that IEP is going to be enacted throughout their day. And that's a real key component. It's also really helpful for families when they want every single thing the kid is going to do on the IEP. So when you have a family member who, and I don't blame them, they're afraid not to have something that the student needs to learn not be on the IEP, because they know the IEP is a legal document. They know that we have to follow it. What they don't know is that we also should have curriculum that we're going to teach whether it's on his IEP or not. But it's really hard for them to buy into that because it's not as accountable. So sometimes when I have families that want to write everything that we're going to do in the curriculum into the kid's IEP, I will put it on a teaching plan so they can see where we're going to teach that curriculum and how we're going to teach it, but not necessarily put it in the IEP. Because it isn't necessarily either an enabling goal for him, or it isn't necessarily something that the rest of the class isn't going to learn. So he's going to be exposed to it, he's going to practice it, he's going to learn it, but it's not necessarily an IEP goal. So I found these to be helpful in that way as well. So those are some of the reasons that I use the tip. It's some of the reasons why I think it's an important step in organizing your classroom. It is the first thing I do, because before you design your physical space, before you create your schedule, you have to know who your students are. Because you're also going to put things on here like, he's in a wheelchair. He needs an on-com device. We need a switch. He needs computer access. Those things are going to affect not only your schedule, but they're also going to affect your physical design of your space. So we have a tendency to look at the class and want to design it first, but really we need to know our kids, and then we have to design it around that. Okay, so let me get out of this and come back to you guys. All right, so we had a few questions, and I think Nicole answered this, but Laura said, I'm noticing that the first student that I showed had no schedule. What is an occasion that a student would not have a schedule? The first page that I showed you was actually, the entry was actually, I think, the second page. Let me just share this with you really quickly, because I think it's an excellent question. Okay, so what she's noting is that down here it says, sorry, I have like two screens that look the same. It says no schedule. That is for the work system. The work system is the independent work system. And for this little guy, he was just working on one basket. We hadn't added a schedule yet. We just wanted him to do one thing with 3 items. It was like the lowest I could go. So it was really, really simple. And that was why he had no schedule. Most of our students will have a schedule in independent work. And I have a whole other blog post about why I think that that is important. But this little guy wasn't really ready for that component, and that's why it wasn't there. So that was an excellent question. Okay. Let me come back. Yes, and he had, on his regular schedule, he had a first then, because that's really all that he could do. I'm going to come back to your question, Kimberly, because it's a little off topic, so I want to come back to that. But I will come back to it before we go, I promise. Holly says she's used the tip with parents who are very invested with their children's education. So that's, again, it's a really nice tool to be able to show them that, yeah, you do know what you're doing. Because they don't, again, I don't blame the parents for feeling like they don't know you. They just met you. You know, it's kind of like I'm selling a house and I kind of have to take what the realtor says. And he says, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. You're the realtor. I don't know how to assess whether he's a good realtor or not. I've known him for a long time. That's why he's my realtor. I bought the house with him. Nicole says this will be awesome at the top of data sheets. And that's actually what, I put the teaching plan in their program book so that I can pick it up and I have a snapshot of how the students are doing. Go ahead and feel free to ask any more questions. I'm going to come back to Kimberly's question. Kimberly says, do I have students who are unable to use PECs? I have students that don't, and it depends on what you mean by PECs. PEC stands for the Picture Exchange Communication System. So it's designed specifically to teach communication. So if it's not just having pictures, it's not just picture symbols. It's an actual strategy for teaching a student to communicate. So the first thing that I want to make sure is that the student is able to recognize either photos or symbols or objects. In fact, Alfred, the little guy that was in the teaching plan, he actually needed objects. He was using objects to make requests because he didn't understand pictures. So I do have students who don't understand picture symbols. Photos sometimes help. Photos are sometimes more problematic. I actually did a Facebook Live last week, I think it was last week, about whether we should use words or picture symbols or photos for schedules. And the same principles apply. So if you're in, I think I actually put it on Facebook. So if you're not in the Special Educator Connection Facebook group, which if you're a family member, you may not be because it's just for educators. I put that one on YouTube so that you could access it there. So if you need that link, just let me know. But it's a good question. And I think there's some confusion sometimes about what PECS means. Okay. Holly would love to see how a program book looks and is set up. I actually have a blog post about that. So I will share that with you in the comments. I'll come back and leave you a note. It's also covered in the Data Monster course, I think. So I'll look there in the Special Educator Academy. So I'll look for that. Brittany says, I have a TPT product for the teaching intervention plan. Yes, I do. Keep in mind, if you are part of the Special Educator Academy, the teaching intervention plan manual, it's teaching plans and schedules that I have on TPT is actually part of the Setting Up Classrooms course in the Academy. So if you're in the Special Educator Academy, don't buy it. If you have problems finding it in the course, let me know, and I will point it out to you. Because I think you're with us, Brittany. But yes, for those of you that are not part of the Academy, I will put the link to the manual, as well as a link that has a free older version of the teaching intervention plan. Other questions? Other topics you guys would like to hear about? Actually, I will put it in I'll put the link on TPT up now. Just everything. PECS training. I will say this. If you have the opportunity to go see the pyramid people who do the PECS training, take it. It is well worth it. Even their introductory 2 days is amazing. Activity schedules, okay. I think I have a blog post coming up soon on implementing teaching activity schedules. I think it's coming out next week. Yeah, the PECS training from Pyramid is phenomenal. I did it 20 years ago and I still absolutely love it. If you are interested in more information than the manual about the teaching intervention plan, about setting up your schedule, setting up your classroom, we have a whole course on that in the Special Educator Academy. And in addition, tonight at 8, we have our live kickoff of a study group that we are doing around that course. So we're going to kind of go through the course piece by piece and have you put some things together for what you know about your classroom so far. And there will be challenges with prizes and stuff like that. And we're starting tonight at 8 o'clock as a live. So if you're in the Academy, I hope you will join us. If you are not in the Academy and want to join, then I will leave you the sales page. Okay, so what to do at recess. Are you looking specifically for activities to do or how to support students at recess, Pam? because I don't think that that's an unusual. Alternative ways to teach reading to students who do not get phonics. Literacy, I think you really want to focus on. Beyond that, and sight words would be the two pieces that I would do. I'm actually hoping to do a switch somewhere with Mrs. P Specialties, and I'm going to have her come talk to you guys some about reading. That's on my list of things to do. And Laura says, Laura went to the teach training last week. They spent a whole day learning how to structure things like recess. That's awesome. So awesome. I love teaching plans. You know, for a long time, I kind of poo-pooed, I created them, but I poo-pooed them and kind of went, I know that you guys don't want to do them, but I think they're really important. Since then, I think you guys have come back and said, wow, these things really work well for me, and I have a little bit more confidence that they are worth the time that you put into them. They are a resource that will last you throughout the years. Yeah. So Ruth Ann says she lives and breathes teaching plans. Are amazing for teachers. Awesome. And Pamela says she's looking for ideas for kids to play at recess. What and how to teach them to interact. Okay. Let me add that to my list. That's a very good question. Other questions, thoughts, problems, questions I didn't answer well enough? Okay. For those of you that are in the Academy, I hope I might see you tonight at 8 in our normal live place. If you can't make it tonight, it'll be recorded and it'll be in the community. The study group community is set up. I will have more details ready for you by the time we meet this evening. If you're not in the Academy, we would love to have you. Sorry, someone's playing music on the road. Tonight is, in the Academy, we're going to kick off the study group for setting up classrooms. So I'm going to kind of give you the orientation. We're actually going to talk some more about teaching plans. And then I'm going to give you the challenges for the next couple weeks. The Academy is $20 a month or $200 for an annual membership. I think people think it's worth it. I have played with the idea of creating a lower level, but I can't figure out what it would look like. So I'm still working on that. All right, everybody, if you've got any more questions about the Academy, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. Anybody in our Special Educator Connection group would also be happy to answer them. There are a lot of members in that group, although it's not exclusive to members. Okay? And if you haven't joined the Special Educator Connection group, Facebook group, and you are teacher, therapist, definitely come join us. It's specialeducatorconnection.com. We'll take you there. Thank you, Holly and Laura. They both say the Academy is absolutely worth it. So worth it, not cheap. I love it. And I would be too. I think it pays. I think it pays, but hopefully it gives back to you in confidence that you can take back to your job and hopefully make it a little easier. That to me, I hope makes it worth it. All right, everybody. I am off to see what my sister is grilling for dinner and play with Lucy. And then I hope to see some of you again at 8 o'clock in the Academy. Everybody have a good night.